You are listening to The Vocal Technologist. Spoken tech for your ears.
Do you ever get that feeling?
Yeah.
Like you're just constantly playing digital catch-up.
Oh, every day.
You spent a whole week, putting out fires, stabilizing one system, and then you wake up Monday morning and it feels like the entire threat landscape has just mutated.
Mutated is the right word.
All
It's
right.
relentless. And looking at the material we've pulled together for today, it's pretty clear we're entering a new phase.
How so?
Well, the attacks aren't just wide anymore. They're getting incredibly deep. They're going after core infrastructure, foundational code, and, well, they're using much smarter AI-driven ways to hide.
Exactly. And that's really our goal here.
Yeah.
We've gone through the most critical recent briefings to try and give you the essential stuff, the high-impact knowledge you need to see where those front lines are actually being drawn now.
Yeah, and we've kind of structured this chat around three big currents. First, we'll start with what we're calling the fragile foundation, just the systemic weaknesses in supply chains and all those embedded systems. Then we'll move into the new battlegrounds. Think persistence, evasion, and this AI arms race that's heating up.
Between the attackers and the defenders.
Exactly. And finally, we'll get into identity, hardware, and the physical world, how real-world crime and even governments are responding to all this digital theft.
All right, let's jump in. And I think a perfect place to start is a vulnerability that should probably have every sysadmin nervously checking their routers right now.
Ah, yes. The Dropbear SSH server.
When we talk fragility, this one's a big one.
It's a perfect example. Dropbear is one of those foundational things that's everywhere but often forgotten. Researchers found a critical vulnerability, CVE 2025-142A2, and it scores a 9.8 on the CVSS scale.
9.8. I mean, that's basically as bad as it gets, code red. So what makes this one so nasty?
It's a privilege escalation flaw, and it affects versions all the way through 2024.84. So the technical bit is that it lets an attacker escalate all the way to root privileges.
Wow.
And it's through a really specific function, which is Unix socket forwarding.
So if an attacker already has some kind of low-level access, this lets them just get the keys to the kingdom.
Precisely. It all comes down to a misuse of the SoPureCred setting.
Okay.
Now, that setting is supposed to authenticate the credentials of whoever is connecting over the socket. But in this case, when a connection gets forwarded, the programs on the other end are mistakenly given root's credentials.
Instead of the actual users.
Right. It's a trust mechanism that gets completely subverted.
And because Dropbear is so lightweight, it's not just on big servers, is it? This thing is everywhere.
Absolutely. It's the default SSH on so many embedded Linux devices, your OpenWRT router, all sorts of single-board computers, the kind of devices that, let's be honest, rarely get patched on time.
So the advice here is pretty urgent, I take it.
Yeah, update immediately to Dropbear 2025-189. If you just can't, then the temporary fix is to either recompile the system to disable that local forwarding feature, or you can use the log flag on the server, which kills both local and TCP forwarding.
The big lesson here feels like our dependencies are a huge liability, which actually leads us perfectly into this whole software supply chain mess, right? Like the Lotus Bale NPM stealer.
Oh, this one's clever.
This wasn't just a malicious package. It was like a deliberate, very sophisticated act of deception.
What's so fascinating is the social engineering that was built right into the package itself. It pretended to be a working fork of the WhatsApp web API, and it did work, It did what it said on the tin.
But that was just the cover.
It was a Trojan horse.
Yeah.
The real payload was this malicious WebSocket wrapper hidden inside.
And what was that payload actually grabbing?
Everything. A massive amount of personal data. We're talking auth tokens, messages, contacts, media files, all sent back to the attacker. But the evasion tactics are what really stand out here.
Especially considering it was downloaded, what, 56,000 times?
56,000. That is huge for a malicious package. It had serious anti-analysis stuff built in. 4 layers of obfuscation, custom RSA encryption, even 27 different anti-debugging traps. But the really insidious part was the persistence. It used a hard-coded pairing code. This created a backdoor that kept providing access even after you found the package and uninstalled it.
So removing the package didn't fix it?
Not at all. The only way to truly fix it was to manually go into your WhatsApp settings and unlink all connected devices. A huge pain.
So the common thread is this reliance on social trust to pull off a technical bypass. You either trust a function in a library like Dropbear, or you trust a developer on NPM. Okay, so let's pivot from these digital components to the the physical services that depend on them.
The physical impact is becoming so undeniable. I mean, look at the recent attacks on critical infrastructure. In Romania, the National Water Authority got hit with a ransomware attack that used BitLocker.
BitLocker, that's just the standard Windows disk encryption tool, but they're weaponizing it.
Exactly. Using it against core infrastructure is a terrifying adaptation.
Yeah.
It wasn't even about stealing data. It was about pure, massive disruption. They disabled 1,000 computers across 10 regional offices.
Did it affect the water supply?
Thankfully, no. The operational tech usually runs on separate, segregated systems, but their core IT was crippled. Email, databases, their GIS systems for mapping, all gone. The whole administrative side just ground to a halt.
And at the same time, in France, their postal service, Le Poste, got hit with a totally different kind of attack, just sheer volume.
A huge DDoS attack. It took down basically everything. For more than 12 hours, their website, the mobile app, their digital ID service, and maybe most worrying, the online services for Banque Postale, their banking arm.
So the message is pretty clear. Whether it's surgical encryption or just overwhelming brute force, these core services are now the primary targets.
It all comes back to that underlying fragility, right? Especially in the open source world these services rely on. You mentioned the libcellmel2 incident, and that story is just staggering.
It really is.
It is the poster child for the open source sustainability crisis.
Right.
libxml2 is foundational. If you use a web browser or the GNOME desktop, you are using this library, period. And the project temporarily lost its sole dedicated volunteer maintainer.
Why? What happened?
Burnout, pure and simple. He was getting security reports, some of them urgent, from massive commercial companies who depend on his code for their multi-billion-dollar products.
And they expected him to just fix it for free.
They expected immediate responses, yeah. But they offered almost no financial compensation, no code contributions. I think there was one donation from Google, and that was it.
So a piece of software critical to the entire global internet was one person's mental health away from being totally abandoned.
All because the commercial users wouldn't pay for the service they were demanding. It just highlights this deep systemic risk. Now, 2 new maintainers have thankfully stepped up, but the incident just proves that we've built modern computing on a mountain of technical debt and an unsustainable volunteer model.
It's just shocking how precarious it all is. And the speed of these attacks, it's alarming, which is exactly what attackers are exploiting when they build these really complex, multi-stage persistence mechanisms, like this next one with the virtual machines.
Yeah, Red Canary found one of the most dedicated persistence tactics I've seen in a while. The attack starts pretty conventionally, spam bombing, fake tech support calls, using the Real Quick Assist tool.
Right.
But the payload is where it gets really novel. The attackers deploy an entire virtual machine to keep their foothold.
Wait, they bring their own machine into the victim's environment? That sounds really complicated to do on the fly.
It is, but it provides incredible evasion. It was a QEMU virtual machine running a small, stable OS like Windows 7 Service Pack 1. And inside that VM, they put all their core tools.
What kind of tools?
Sliver Command and Control Implant Sliver is a really popular C2 framework now, along with QDOR and Screen Connect for backup access.
But wouldn't running QEMU be a huge red flag? Couldn't they just rename the executable or something?
They're betting that most corporate networks aren't looking for QEMU itself. They're looking for known malware signatures, right? Which the VM helps to hide. And the VM was set up to do internal network recon using SRV record queries.
Okay, so it was mapping the internal network.
Exactly, finding key services, all while communicating out to its hard-coded command and control servers.
That is just persistence on a whole other level.
Yeah.
The defenses have to evolve just as fast.
They have to. You have to start monitoring for any weird QEMU execution, put strict controls on remote tools like Quick Assist, and your blue teams need to be hunting for specific indicators like the SSL certificates Sliver uses, which often have a generic multiplayer common name.
This just raises the big question, though.
Yeah.
How do defenders possibly keep up with this level of complexity? It feels like the only way to manage this speed is to start using the attacker's own best tool against them, AI.
And that's exactly what's happening. AI is being deployed to handle the massive scaling problem that security teams are facing. Look at something called the Valhalla strategy.
Valhalla.
Yeah, it's basically about using large language models to solve the false positive problem you get from static analysis tools like CodeQL.
So instead of human having to sift through thousands of potential bugs, you just have the AI do it?
Pretty much. The system feeds the CodeQL findings and all the necessary code context into an LLM. Then it guides the LLM with these structured questions, almost like a Socratic dialogue. It mimics how a senior researcher would reason about whether a bug is actually exploitable.
So it's making bug hunting scalable in these massive code bases.
Exactly. And companies like Google are doing similar things. They started by building internal trust, using AI for smaller tasks like data analysis and translation, before moving to these bigger agentic approaches.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. The defensive AI tools themselves. They're dealing with this huge unsolved security problem of their own. OpenAI has been surprisingly open about it.
They have. They basically admit that prompt injection attacks against their AI browsers like ChatGPT Atlas are a persistent long-term risk. They compare it directly to social engineering.
You can't patch human behavior.
And they believe you can't completely patch prompt injection either. It's a continuous arms race, even inside their own tools. They're actually running LLM-based automated attackers in simulations just to constantly probe their own systems for new attack strategies.
And on the flip side, the attacker tools are becoming terrifyingly efficient. I mean, this token flare phishing framework is a perfect example.
Oh, yeah. It's an AI-driven high-speed attack tool.
What makes it so effective?
Well, it's a serverless AITM adversary-in-the-middle phishing framework.
So it sits between the victim and the real site.
Right. Proxying the whole session, capturing data in real time. It completely bypasses most multi-factor authentication because it's stealing the session cookie after you've authenticated. And this framework specifically targets Entra ID, M365 accounts.
And the speed.
Its core logic is just 530 lines of JavaScript.
Yeah.
You can deploy it in less than 60 seconds on platforms like Cloudflare Workers. It even has built-in techniques to bypass in-tune conditional access policies. It grabs everything.
That is dizzy in speed. For the blue teams out there, are there any clear signs? Any breadcrumbs?
Luckily, yes. The developers left a static indicator of compromise. If you see an HTTP header that says X token flare, authorized security testing, you know exactly what framework is being used against you.
Okay, so we've covered the shaky software foundation and the AI battlefield. Let's dig into the physical layer now, where the digital and the real world smash together, starting with the foundational hardware flaw.
Riot Games researchers, yes, the video game company, they found a pretty significant vulnerability in UEFI. That's the software that basically boots up your computer before the operating system kicks in.
And this affects a ton of vendors.
Oh yeah, all the big names. Megabyte, MSI, Asus, ASRock.
That's a massive footprint of machines. What exactly does this flaw allow?
It enables some very sophisticated pre-boot attacks using direct memory access, or DMA. DMA lets hardware, like a PCIe card, write directly to system memory without bothering the CPU. Normally, you have something called the IOMMU, the Input-Output Memory Management Unit, that acts like a bouncer.
And this flaw gets past the bouncer.
It does. An attacker can attach a rogue DMA-capable device, say, over a Thunderbolt port, and because of this flaw, that device loads before the OS and bypasses the IOMU's protections. It lets them get deep into the system before any security software is even running.
It's important to stress, though, this still needs physical access, right? The attacker has to be there.
Oh, absolutely. They have to be physically present to plug in that device before the machine boots. But it shows that convergence of physical access and digital theft, which is perfectly illustrated by these organized ATM jackpotting schemes.
The scale of these criminal groups is it's frightening.
The U.S. Department of Justice recently indicted 54 people linked to a Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua. And this was for a huge multi-million-dollar ATM jackpotting operation.
How much did they get away with?
Since 2021, they're tied to over 1,500 incidents and have stolen more than $40 million.
$40 million? How are they even pulling that off? It sounds like a mix of old school break and enter and some high-tech malware.
It's a very detailed, multi-stage process. First, physical recon. They'd actually test ATM hoods to see how sensitive the alarms were. Then they'd get inside, sometimes forcing their way in, sometimes just swapping out the hard drive. And they'd install malware called Plautus.
And Plautus just tells the machine to spit out cash.
Pretty much. It issues unauthorized commands directly to the cash dispensing module. They specifically went after older Windows-based ATMs, especially those still running Windows XP, which are much easier to exploit. And they were good at cleanup to deleting forensic evidence to cover their tracks.
That sheer volume of theft really highlights the need for stronger identity verification, which brings us to how governments are starting to respond. South Korea is making a really dramatic move.
This is a major change. Starting March 23rd, South Korea is mandating facial recognition matched against your official ID photo for anyone signing up for a new mobile number.
For everyone.
Everyone, all major carriers, all the virtual operators.
That is a massive rollout of biometrics into everyday life. What pushed them to do that?
They're trying to curb these widespread voice phishing scams. They need to block phones that are registered under fake identities, especially after a huge data breach at SK Telecom exposed something like 27 million SIM subscribers details. It just shows how fast governments will move to strict biometric mandates when a crime wave hits a crisis point.
Before we wrap up, for everyone listening who's actually tasked with defending against all this, there are a couple of useful tools that came up that are worth a quick mention.
For sure. For security folks in Apple environments, there's Mac Persistence Checker. It's a native macOS tool that finds and scores persistence mechanisms across more than 20 different categories.
And it maps to MITRE, ATT, and CK.
Yep, maps everything to IDER, and even has an optional AI integration to help you analyze changes over time. It's very useful for a modern enterprise.
And what about for developers trying to lock things down from the start?
Docker has released over 1,000 free, hardened open source images. They're built to be secure from the ground up. They run as a non-root user by default, they're regularly scanned, and they're minimal, which just drastically cuts down the attack surface. It's a really great resource.
So we've really covered a lot of ground. We've seen how precarious our digital foundation is, from a critical flaw in Dropbear to the burnout that almost crippled a core internet library.
Yeah, and we've seen attackers evolve into these deep layered threats, deploying entire VMs for persistence, launching serverless phishing campaigns like Token Flare.
And then we see governments responding with these hardline biometric mandates like mandatory Face ID in South Korea.
Yeah.
That's why we do this whole vocal technologist thing, right? To try and make some sense of it all.
And if you connect all those dots, the bigger picture, the real dilemma, it isn't just about patching the known flaws anymore. We're being forced to shore up decades of fragile, under-supported code, all that technical debt, while at the same time preparing for an era where AI is just accelerating both the offense and the defense at breakneck speed. That's the duality of the challenge now.
That is a profound duality. And it really makes me think about the pace of those new identity mandates. You see these massive data breaches happening all the time, the University of Phoenix, Nissan, and then you see governments requiring more and more biometric verification. It just makes you wonder, right? Are we at a tipping point where centralized mandatory identity verification, like South Korea is doing, just becomes the global default? And if that happens, what are the irreversible trade-offs we're making? What are we giving up in privacy and local control for the sake of that centralized security?
A critical question for you to mull over as you're reviewing your own security posture this week.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for walking through all this crucial material with us. We really appreciate you joining the conversation.
My pleasure.
We'll catch you next time.
Spoken Tech, for your ears.